It's Ian Ryan with your pre-match warm-up, West Ham for the Reds on Sunday afternoon. I've got Neil Atkinson, Jack Hunter and Craig Hannan with me to get stuck into that, and obviously much, much more. We will have a caller a little bit later in the show as well. But Craig, we will have to talk about the manager, or whether we like it or not. I've done a lot of free shows with Neil this season, and on the back of what feels like a lot of defeats, I've said things like, I would like the manager to be given more time. I think he's earned the opportunity through winning the league last year, that he should have some time to put some of this right. And then Wednesday happens, and I don't know about you, but you start to question everything a little bit more then. Because I can say all of those things on shows, and I can mean them, but there's also a point where it has to look better, it has to get better, and quite quickly. We're 48 hours on now from the PSV game. Where are you?
I think that you can't allow the rot to get to a certain stage where it becomes, the rot isn't just with the manager. It sort of feeds into the players as well, who are obviously, the players haven't been as strong, performance this season as what they have been in the past, obviously. Where I am with the manager is I'm really worried for him. I like him. I'm watching Liverpool make the same mistakes. I'm seeing the same scorelines. I'm seeing them get beat by 3 goals in 3 games successively, which we said can happen at City and has happened in the past. But then it's at home to Forest, and the PSV one was the one that I was most annoyed about out of all of them, really, because I was watching a team make the same mistakes that they had in the previous games. I'm watching a team with no resilience. I'm watching a team who just look broken. Whether that is in terms of their own individual performances, in terms of the approach and the way in which they're being asked to do. So I'm really worried for the manager. I'm not going to lie. Like I'm someone who will always aim to give him a bit more time than maybe some might want, and that might be mostly because of the landscape we find ourselves in, whereby there is not someone that I'm looking at and going, oh yeah, no, we bring him in, but then that's not my job to do. So Michael Edwards and the boys will have the data and we'll have the list, because I didn't know who Slot was whenever they bring Slot in. I'm really worried, and Wednesday made me much more worried, and I'm worried for Sunday, to be honest with you. I've seen these games as opportunities for things to be turned around. What I don't want is Liverpool set up in exactly the same way, asking to do the same things, reacting in the same way they have done to setbacks, and then I don't want the manager having to bring off the centre back again and put someone else in there and then throwing loads of forwards on up top.
It does have to look and feel different, Jack, doesn't it? I was concerned about Sunday anyway, to be honest. I said that last week, but then again Wednesday happens and you're even more concerned. And I thought they'd be okay on Wednesday, because in the main, in Europe and certainly at home, they've looked far better. The football's different, it's not quite as intense, and you think actually PSV, whilst having respect for them because they are top of their own division, you never quite feel that league is comparable to the Premier League, for instance. So you think they're going to be okay, and yet it was so bad. By the end, you almost can't quite believe how bad it is. Where are you with this situation now?
Yeah, I think it's very precarious, isn't it? Like, as we've just talked about, I was one that wanted to give Slot time, and I think he still does have a little bit of time, but I think Sunday's a big match for him. I think it really has to change. I think he has to have a bit more authority in what he's doing. I think if you look at other managers in history, look at your Fergies, your Wengers, all this, if these had results going forward, if I was a manager, I would install some more power into the dressing room. I would change players in different positions. Whether it works out on Sunday, I don't know. But something, as you say, has to change. I think if you're playing Kanate over and over again and he's having terrible results, how do you feel if you're Gomez, or even if you put like Gravenberch in the back, or just something to show that like it's not okay with the way you're performing? We have had a terrible pre-season with whatever's gone on, and with Jota is obviously horrific and the way the players are feeling, but there's a level of professionalism when you play for Liverpool that we've got to adhere to, and it wasn't so much the result on on Wednesday, it was mostly with the way they played. Like if they, I was saying this before, like so we went 1 down over this mad penalty that Van Dijk's looking like he's going to the toilet in school with his arm up. But like if he's doing that, if we bounce back from that 1-0, we go into half time 1-1, and then we win 3-1, 4-1. That could have been a turning point in the season because we've gone 1 down. Historically, we've not done well last season we've come from coming behind, and then we could have won. But coming out from half time, they look like a different team. They look like they didn't track back. They didn't care. They weren't running. And what's gone on in that dressing room? Has he lost it? Has he lost the dressing room? Has he lost the power? That should have been a motivational team talk of, look, this could be the turning point in our season. But it wasn't. They were like the opposite. It was like a role reversal. Like PSV were then on top of us all second half, where in fact the first half we looked all right. And I think he needs to make changes, just to show that I have the authority here. If you ain't playing well, just because who you are, of how much money we've spent in the season, that it has to change. That things your position in our starting 11 isn't just a given at times. I think something needs to happen. I think Sunday's a big match for Slot overall.
Those last 2 second halves, Neil, they've really worried me because the manager gets them in against Forest, gets them in against PSV, and almost immediately in both games, you just get a real sense that it's going to go the wrong way for Liverpool. It really is, and it does play out that way. Managers have come through sticky situations in the past. You know, Paul Joyce did an article yesterday. He references some of those who've come through at the other side. You know, Guardiola last season, he wins 1 out of 13. You kind of forget that. But given the track record he's got, you never felt he was under that kind of pressure, despite an Anfield crowd, you know, giving him a bit of stick when he comes to our place, and him obviously not taking that too well. But I always felt he'd come through that. Given where we are now, do you see the manager can come through this, or has it almost got that sense of inevitability about it?
I think the funny thing when you say that about the second halves, listen, let's be clear, Forest is, whatever's gone on at half time is massively undermined by what the players do for the first 40 seconds. And you've got to allow that leeway. I think, you know, it was atrocious, but that was solely down to the footballers on the pitch, in that they find themselves suddenly 2-0 down and rudderless within the game. And no manager can account for that. You know, I think you've got to allow that one. But it was hugely concerning on Wednesday because they'd looked fine. They'd looked brilliant, but they'd looked like a better side than their opponents, which is what we all think they are on paper. What the pay packets would all suggest that they are, what the transfer fees would all suggest that they are. They look like that in the first half, and like they had an idea. It's worth saying PSV don't have a shot first half apart from the penalty. They don't have a shot. So it's not just, you know, this isn't some sort of, I thought Liverpool played well, but you check the data afterwards. They don't have a single shot. And then Liverpool get themselves into this situation where they come out second half and they couldn't have dangled more encouragement in front of PSV. Could not have dangled more encouragement in front of them. So to your wider point about, you know, what comes next, I think it is important that when we're talking about what they should or shouldn't repeat, or when people say things like back to basics, for me back to basics is you play football matches in periods. I don't care whether you play them with the ball or without the ball. I don't care whether or not you're thundering into tackles or you're deciding to sit deep and pose a problem. You play football matches in periods and you concentrate on whatever the number one job is for that period. So, tricky-ish away game on Sunday. First 15 minutes, what's the number one job? It's 0-0 at the end of 15 minutes. That's back to basics. It isn't, you know, lads running around getting yellow cards because they're trying to prove that they love X, Y, or Z. It is instead the idea of pure professionalism, collective focus, and everyone doing the same thing. Everyone having the same thing in mind, everyone doing the same thing. And I think that is part of that. And then I think, you know, to then touch on sort of other matters within there as well, as you're asking, I think that then what becomes important is saying whatever it is that we're choosing to do, we know what the minimum required standard is, to Jack's point. And I think that he's got to get them into that mindset. They've got to get themselves into that mindset. I'm cross with them. I think there's elements where I'm cross with one or two of them individually. I'm cross with them as a collective. But I think it's also perfectly fine and accurate to also be cross with him. I think he's had a couple of projects over the course of the season that I think he's taken a little bit too far or ran at the wrong time. And I think he's, for whatever reason, and I think, listen, there's loads of context around where other players are for fitness, but he has put up with one or two consistent poor performers, too many. And last season, one of the things that we all remember early doors is Gerald Quanta has a bad first half.
Yeah.
Not that bad a first half.
Ruthless.
He has a bad first half, and then effectively the league season at centre-back's no longer his business. It's as simple as that. That's what happens. That's the way in which it goes. This season, you know, it's worth pointing out that the fella who comes on for him at half-time there has repeatedly been far poorer, both in the round and in specific moments, and yet just gets picked. Just gets picked. Now, it might be that the manager's looking around going, I just cannot trust the fitness of Gomez. He's looking around going, so I'd have to move something else and it's more disruption and all of that. And he's coming to that conclusion. And it might be that internally they all know that. But it feels to me as though there's got to be some sort of break point for one or two performers at a minimum, where even if Liverpool are likely to want to play a similar style of football because it's the football that suits the players and that the manager wants to play, but you've got to be able to say there's a line in the sand. And I think that that's the pressure that's on the manager now, is how he does that whilst managing his resources. But the other thing to point out, after all the money spent, and I do mean this, and I don't mean this as being about the manager, because I've said there why I'm angry with the manager, I've said why I'm angry with the players. But if you look at his unused subs against PSV, his unused subs, before you even get onto his used ones, but his unused subs, there's not a single one of them in there that you bring on in the situation that Liverpool find themselves in. So it's Gomez, Endo, Robertson. You can maybe make an argument you throw Robertson on, but I didn't think Kirkes was crying out to be subbed out. And then you keep going down the list. It's Trey Ione, it's Ria Ingamoa. Well, I don't want either of them involved in this current situation, the two young lads. And then it's two sub-keepers. Freddie Woodman being one of them, and Monsieur, who was almost certainly may never kick a ball for the club. That's where he's left. That's what he's got as his resources at this point in time. So it's dead easy, even for me, to sit here and say, I want to see him change it up, or I want to see 4 changes. Well, what 4 changes do you want?
Yeah.
You're going through that. And to have spent that much money, and, you know, I said on review, and I'll say it again, I think there's a little thing where I didn't like this idea that was put about and made clear that Liverpool think Chiesa and Rio Ingamoa are first team options, because it's been crystal clear the manager doesn't. So Liverpool don't think that. But around the sales of a couple of players, the purchases of others, what was being said was, and Liverpool think Chiesa, and we all know you say stuff, football clubs say stuff that they don't necessarily mean because they're sending the stuff out. But it has ended up negatively impacting Liverpool. It's Trey Ione right now, we all saw him against Crystal Palace. He is not a first team option. The manager doesn't think that Endo is a first team option. So what that means is that the manager is walking into games with 4 centre mid options plus Wirtz, depending on how he sees Wirtz. He's walking into games with 4 forward options plus Wirtz. And by the way, one of them in Isak is not fit, has not been fit, and it is not reasonable to expect him, at least until around now, to be near fitness, given the fact that he didn't have a pre-season. And that's what the manager's been given with that's the hand that he's been dealt. They've been unlucky at right back, but it's not from nowhere that Bradley's going to have at least another year where he gets injuries. Like, that's sort of quite widely known. They've been a bit unlucky at centre-half. They wanted another one, but they didn't get it sorted. So you end up in this situation where you can end up saying, well, the manager's not being helped. And that's why I think it is difficult. So it's easy for us to sit here and say we all want it to look different and we want to see him make a ton of changes and all of that. But he's not going to suddenly start throwing Trey Ione in. And I don't want him to. That would be actively the wrong thing to do. So I think it's difficult, and I think it's hard, and I think it's a challenge. And I think right now we're in amongst it, and the thing to do is to stand together. But that means that they've got to stand together, and they've got to do their job, and they've got to not mess about, and they've got to not make stupid mistakes, because this is hard enough at the minute for this Liverpool team when you haven't got your captain giving away a daft penalty after 5 minutes and your second most senior centre-half putting it on a plate for them when you're already 2-1 down.
What do you think he wants us to be? So you just said there about bringing on someone to play the way in which he wants us to play. Like, what do you think that is?
I think I don't think it's that far away from what we were doing last season, and I think there's been a desperation to act as though they want it to be well different. I don't think so. I think that the plan was last season, but at key moments a little bit better and ideally a little bit fresher. But part of what they've done is they've undermined freshness, and then you've seen them chopping and changing a little bit and looking to manage for the future and look to sort of, whereas last season, from pretty early on, it was quite clear these are the lads who were going to fire us up to the table. And this season, I think he's had one eye on a couple of other little bits and pieces. I think he's wanted to be able to be a little bit more fluent in attack, a la PSG, but I don't think I think there's a bit of a perception that he's thrown everything out. I don't think he has, but I think he's been trying to use the resources that he's got. And then within there's been a couple of bad performances, and obviously everything's coloured by the fact that the pre-season's massively disrupted and there's this huge thing that's gone on in the background. But it's still, most teams in the Premier League play either a variation of 4-3-3/4-2-3-1 or 5-2-3. That's it. Like, most sides play that. Very few sides play a formation that's different to that. And we're still playing 4-3-3. It's what we were playing last season. No matter what he's done, almost at any point. People say, well, Frankfurt, does he play more of a 4-4-2? Well, he uses Wirtz in a slightly wider area on the right and maybe drops Gakpo a little bit deeper. But Isak and Ekitike play close together on the left-hand side, almost like a bit of a 4-3-3 where, you know, there was times where Firmino played close to Mane, times where Firmino played close to Salah. You know, you move those players around. I think everyone's determined to act as though Liverpool have looked to do something massively different. Gravenberg's maybe been a bit more front-footed at times over the course of the season because maybe Liverpool feel as though they can get a little bit more from that. But I don't think it's massively different. It's still 4 lads at the back, 3 lads in midfield, and 3 lads who play as attackers. And it's still the centre forward does loads of pressing and loads of work. That's been the case whoever played there. They've done loads and loads of running. You know, I don't think it's been... Wirtz has been pressing. He's just not 6'3" and as imposing as Dom Szoboszlai. But Wirtz, when he's played there, hasn't been strolling around the pitch acting like I play number 10 now. He's been running hard and working hard. I don't think it's that different.
That's my biggest worry is that I don't think it looks anything like last season, or at least the good parts. And I don't think they've signed players for last season. Now that's, you know, they talked about Slot being the head coach, was it, and not the, so that's maybe not Slot point of view. But then if they're wanting to look like PSG or a bit more like PSG, the fullbacks don't go up and down the way PSG do, and the players that they've signed, they don't ask the players, and the ones that they've got, they don't ask them to do the same thing. They've signed a forward, a number 9, who doesn't look like a player that would fit into how PSG played against us anyway, and that feels like a mad thing to say about Isak. And then when you look at the manager, you look at a manager who doesn't act or look even like the same manager as what he was last season in terms of that ruthlessness that you talked about.
But the number 9 though, it is similar to the way Jota and Nunez at the very least played number 9 for us last season when it's been Ekitike or Isak. The high pressing, they're putting themselves about. You end up.
That suits Isak then?
Well, I don't know, but you end up often saying, well, I don't feel like whoever it is involved enough. But that's what we were saying last season. And we were also saying that about Diaz when Diaz went number 9. By the way, you feel as though there's a lot of work going on there, but there's not much in the penalty box. That's what we were all saying last season. We were, you know, even when we were playing well last season, we were all saying, you know, you just don't feel like you're getting much out of Nunez around the penalty area. You didn't feel like you were getting tons out of Jota around the penalty area, a little bit more than Nunez. You didn't feel like you were getting loads out of Diaz. You got more out of Diaz in terms of end product, goals and assists when he was left wing. We were all saying that last season, and now we're sort of saying it this season, but the difference is you've spent 180 million on these 2 footballers to come in, and if what they're going to end up doing is loads of pressing work, the point then I think the manager might say is, yeah, but I just think at the key moments, they're likely to provide you with the magic that we didn't have from number 9 last season. At key moments, everyone was saying there's not enough output from Szoboszlai playing number 10. So at key moments, Wirtz comes in and you see a little bit more of that. And I think that there is, you know, I think that the PSG thing was in the manager's head, maybe to an extent. But I don't think they're desperate to absolutely play like that. But again, I would sort of point out, PSG play with four defenders, 3 midfielders and 3 forwards. How you blend that's different. And yeah, I don't think they've wanted to throw anything out in any grand way. But I think you're just sort of looking at it at the minute and they're just so brittle. There's no belief, there's no resilience.
There's so many things wrong. But I mean, your point there about the number 9, I mean, it certainly doesn't suit Isak when you've got the 2 lads either side of him just cutting in and shooting. That's not going to service Isak in any way, shape or form. So they're going to have to figure some of that out as well.
Or Salah's not pressing because we said last season that the other 2 are doing the work for Salah.
Yeah.
And so then you add him to that, and suddenly there's 2 in there that, you know, it doesn't. My point earlier, and I didn't really make it very well because it was the beginning of the show, but my point earlier around the sort of the core and a rot setting in is my biggest worry is, so if I look at Slot, I worry that we all talk about Liverpool. The Liverpool manager is not just being a manager, and he was brought on, you're just a head coach, but Liverpool manager is not that, because in moments like this, it's a much bigger job to try and pull a football club out of this than what it may be, and there's a lot more sort of on you. And my biggest worry about Slot is not just that we don't look as well coached, and he was a brilliant coach last season. He isn't making decisions in the way that he was in the past. My biggest worry is him as a leader being able to lead us out of this, and then the rot that's happening to our leaders on the pitch. So you're looking at Van Dijk at the minute and going, like it doesn't look like the Van Dijk that we've known. You're looking at Salah, you know, and particularly on the pitch, they're not these vocal leaders. So I'm looking and I'm going, well, what I don't want is I don't want to rot on set, and so that we get to a point where even if you get rid of Slot and you bring someone else in, the dressing room's still broken anyway, you know. So that's one of my biggest worries, is this goes on so long that then, you know, performances that, you know, like Van Dijk's at the other day, we were looking at it and going like, this makes no sense to me, continues. We've seen Salah this season. It's a really, really difficult place that we find ourselves in as a football club, because you're looking around and going, well, actually, I'm not entirely sure who I'd want to bring in. And if they were going to bring someone else in, then it feels to me as if the best possible thing to do would be to bring someone in on the interim. And it's absolutely an interim manager that takes us to the end of the season. Everyone knows that. But then I'm like, well, who the fuck is that other than Jurgen Klopp? Which feels like going back, I was talking to Neil earlier, feels like going back to an ex-girlfriend. You know, it's an emotional, do you know what I mean? It's an emotional, you're like, fucking hell, yeah, like let's do it all again. But is it the right thing? Is it what Edwards will want? I don't fucking know anymore, Ian.
I'm glad to have you on. Jack, I think loads of this is complicated. You know, Neil's outlined loads of different things there, and I think it's fair to say you can't just kind of put this squarely at the manager's door. He will have to take responsibility because he is the figurehead for the football club. There's no getting away from that. And if there is a decision to be made, it will be his future. You know, the players aren't going to suddenly get shipped out. It will come down to the manager being moved on. As I've said before, I hope he can get his way through some of this, but you start to kind of doubt it as the kind of weeks move on and stuff. But I think there is something around squad balance. You know, Neil talked about there, you know, what they've brought in. I don't want to rewrite history too much, because I think when those players were being signed, I think broadly speaking, most people were pretty happy with what was coming through the door. I was always a little bit concerned about maybe what had gone out, but also what they weren't able to do. Now, there's only so much you can do in a given summer, so you have to kind of take that into account. But I remember when Isak signed, I was a little bit, the wind was taken out my sails a little bit by not getting a centre half in. I was hugely disappointed by that, because I felt he would need one. And I also, despite them winning the league with this midfield, I did want to see another midfielder come in, just someone who had a little bit about him, maybe going both ways, but certainly someone who could sniff danger a little bit more than maybe what we've got at the minute. My biggest kind of gripe, and I think maybe you could sort some of this out with slightly better coaching in terms of keeping people a little bit closer together in the middle of the park. But I never feel when I look at our midfield that they smell danger at the right times. You know, the house is almost on fire before anyone's really reacting to anything. That's a problem as well. But ultimately, we can say all of this, but one of the reasons they hired the manager, and Joycey talks about it in his piece, they had this big, massive 60-page dossier, and one of the things that was in there was he can get more out of players than arguably many other managers across the world. That was one of the things that really took them towards Slot. There was different things, there was different metrics they were using, but one of the things was keeps players fit, but actually the players he's got, he's capable of getting so much more out of them. So they'll be reflecting on that, and they'll be looking at that, and one of the things will be now, we've given you these superstars. Is it perfectly balanced? You'd say probably not, given what we've seen, but my God, we are expecting more from you in terms of getting more out of them.
Yeah, I think that's what I was kind of getting at before, is that with Slot, you're looking as we went 1-0 down, go 1-1. If Klopp's in that dressing room half time, I feel like the players played for Liverpool and Klopp. I feel like Klopp was the centrepiece of the team. As you say, he's not just a head coach role. It is like a gravitas that you have with the club. Can I see Slot giving these big motivational team talks? Can I see him giving the hair dry treatment to Konate? Can I see this happening? Probably not. He looked a bit dejected in the press conference. He didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't know how to change it, or the vibe of it. I don't know how to explain it, but it didn't look commanding for me. It didn't look like the leader of one of the best football teams in the world, like your Klopps and your Joses and your Fergies and all these characters. It didn't come across like that to me, and I think he has a different management style that maybe doesn't suit the players in the way that they are used to with Klopp, with the way that we used to operate. And also, I think, going back to the other point, if you're Konate, you probably aren't that asked whether you're playing or not, because you know you haven't got a replacement looking for your place in the squad. You know, if you're a player that's not playing well, we don't have the depth to be swapping you all the time. You've not got that driving force all the time. You've got the Konate stuff at Real Madrid going on, you've got all this going on, but he doesn't have an active replacement, but he's chasing at him all the time. And that's pressure for everyone as well as the manager. And I do feel sorry for Slot at the moment. I do feel like he's doing the right things, and ultimately he can't directly influence on the pitch. He's not kicking the ball, he's not doing it. But does he have the pull to get the players to play for him, to play for his job? And I don't know whether he does.
The thing about this though is you've got to be careful, because there's 2 periods when Klopp's manager when a lot of this stuff just didn't apply. We lose 6 consecutive home games, and it is during the pandemic, so it's not in front of people, but it's a genuinely a period where Liverpool look abysmal. And that idea of, and there's a fella in the dressing room who's going to rally them and lead them, well, it wasn't happening. And then you go to 22-23 when they look, there's Brighton away where they look clueless. And there's extended periods of that season where they look really badly coached, and there isn't some sort of grand motivational force that comes in. You can look at Mourinho, who I always remember after the second spell wins the league one year. Chelsea are languishing very deep mid-table, and he's given 25-minute post-match interviews where he answers only 2 questions, and it's like watching a man have a meltdown. But we think Mourinho is this big personality and he'll sort them out, and the absolute opposite happens. The season's, even for Ferguson, in a completely different landscape, where his own fans are chanting 4-4-2 at him. Because things are like the big character, the idea of, and he's a big character and he's a big leader. You can always find an instance in there. Guardiola last season was the first time he's seen any adversity, and at one point, I think they've only won 1 game in 13. Manchester City at one point last season.
Yeah, it was.
And we see Guardiola, and Guardiola will be able to sort that out, but he's gone through that ringer as well. So I think it's important not to, by all means, that doesn't mean, by the way, with Chelsea and the Mourinho example there, well, Mourinho goes, Chelsea go on and have a good season, the first time Mourinho has to go, and move from there. But there are examples of, you name almost any managerial great, and I think probably Bob Paisley's the only one who, and even in 81, Liverpool finished 5th, but they just win the European Cup because of Bob Paisley. You look at almost any managerial great, and there's some sort of moment where you're going, well, things look really ropey for him here. I think one of the things that does concern you for Slot, though, is it is the first time this has happened to him in the whole of his managerial career. This is literally, we're watching it now, we're watching him learn. This is what I do, or what I shouldn't do, or what I'll learn from experience next time when things aren't going the way in which we'd like. And I think it is worth, he's young as a manager. When Jurgen Klopp took over Liverpool, Arne Slot had never managed a football team once. So it's worth remembering that, and in both directions, both in terms of maybe having a bit more sympathy with him in one way, but also just sort of going, well, but he's got this problem now and we need him to fix it, and he's never done it before, on the other. But every manager, I think, you care to name, we're still 8 months away from people openly mocking Arteta for stuff he was saying in press conferences, and genuinely look at them now, where they find themselves. I don't think it ever got quite as bad for Arteta last season as it is now for Slot, or was last season for Guardiola, or was in 22-23 for Klopp. But right now, but people were openly mocking Arteta back in March and April about everything he said in every press conference. I just don't think these lads' jobs are that straightforward, and there's always other things going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. None of that is to say it becomes an argument that you keep any manager forever, or that there should never be any change. That Mourinho example was a man who just needed to no longer be doing that job. He needed someone to say, you don't need to worry about this now, someone else is going to do this, and you go and clear your head. But in the same way, Guardiola took time off after Barcelona because it's kettled his head so much all the way back then. I think it's really, really difficult. I think the whole thing's difficult. I think it's difficult to watch from the outside. I just think this fella genuinely, I think the loyalty matters. I think loyalty matters in football. And I'm very much behind the manager until the point at which he almost knows, because last season was remarkably special and it doesn't happen by accident. He's a massive, massive part of it. And I think that for me, he's earned more than enough to be given a bit more time to sort of see where he ends up in amongst all of this, and then we go from there.
How much more time?
I think a lot of that, it's whether or not it turns into, I expect the season now to be like 22-23, where Liverpool, there will be a correction at some point, and Liverpool will start to win some games, but nothing's ever fixed. So we'll go through the whole season where, they might win a couple, and then someone will say, we're back, and then suddenly from nowhere there'll be a really disappointing result. I don't expect there to be a continued extended losing run. I think there's a point where there's a continued extended losing run where there's a phone call made from people above Arne Slot to the captain to effectively go, is this just entirely broken at your end here, and there's nothing that can be done? And you've got to trust that the responsible people who love Liverpool Football Club and love doing the best job for them come to a conclusion. But I'm of the view, as I say, I think that this will stabilise back down into Liverpool play 3, they play quite well in 2 of them, don't play that well in the other one, win 2, lose 1, they maybe win the one they shouldn't and lose one of the ones they should, because they've got no resilience, they've got no backbone. But when things go well for them, when the wins at the back, Liverpool win games. When the wins in the face, Liverpool don't. That was the story of 22-23.
But when that happened in 22-23, sorry, and
no,
when
that
happened in 22-23, Klopp had won everything, hadn't he? And we'd watched him. Your point earlier, I think's right, where we'd watch him get out of the shit. Curtis Jones said we're in the shit. We'd watch Klopp get us out.
This is why Guardiola was never under any real serious pressure, apart from people trying to the crowd making fun of him and stuff. He knew full well you don't achieve what he's achieved and fear for your job. He was always going to be given the time, but he does feel insecure.
Of course, because you feel insecure by bad performances. I thought that Guardiola did come over insecure in that period. I think coming over insecure is right. Klopp in 22-23 looks finished. He looks a busted flush. I think we now know enough in hindsight to think that there was definitely a universe where he himself might have gone, you know what, I've got to not do this here. I think genuinely a great deal of the same grace, not quite 100% of the same grace, but a great deal of the same grace has got to apply. It's a league title. It's the league title that we all wanted. And I don't think you get to sort of write that off as, and it wasn't a major or significant achievement. It was, with one of the best squads and with one of the biggest budgets. So for me, I'm in the exceptionally patient camp, and I'm happy to be in the exceptionally patient camp. Also because I think almost any alternative will also be dealing with some quite significant issues and won't have the fact that they were there with them last season and there with them in the summer. And it might be that some people will be listening to this thinking, well, maybe a fresh voice might mean that would be different, or someone who can sort of disregard bits of that. I don't know if that's, given the depth of the obvious feeling around the tragedy, I don't think you can sort of disregard that into going, well, a fresh voice and someone who didn't go through it with them, it will obviously immediately get better. I don't think you've got any guarantees on that whatsoever.
Because that's the biggest issue. 2021, the issue you could see was literally something you could see. You could see that Nat Phillips and Reece Williams were having to play centre back for Liverpool, and this time it's not fit. It's mental. And that's my biggest worry for him, really, is that this is, given everything that's happened, is just a completely different sort of, you may just need a fresh start, you may need someone new, just even the feeling of...
But in 22-23 it was tactical. And if anything, that should be more on the manager's plate.
But it still always felt like with Jurgen, just get to the end of the season and it's a fresh start.
I think
again.
With some of this, it does move at a pace. I talked about how I was feeling at the start of the show, and listen, I would still like him to have a bit more time, but there is a tipping point. And I think even Carragher said something only a week ago. He said you can't sack him this season. And then he's doing a column, maybe it's out today, maybe it was out yesterday, where he's got 3 games to save his job.
And it's so hard.
And that's when it becomes difficult, because all of a sudden he's talking about the game at the weekend, he's talking about Sunderland at home, and he's talking about Leeds. And I think he even says in that piece, he's got to get 7 points. That's how quickly it seemed to change. Jonathan Liu was talking yesterday about have some of the senior players suddenly stop believing the vision of the manager, possibly. I don't think we can know that. But maybe you get to find out a little bit more in terms of a reaction, because a lot of the players have said stuff, and some of it's annoyed me, to be honest. I understand they get asked questions, but I almost want them to, where they can, bat some of it away. But if you're going to make statements, you better go and fucking back it up on the pitch of the weekend. No good coming out with big statements and then handballing it within 5 minutes and putting your team massively under pressure. Even the Curtis Jones thing, and I like Curtis, I like his honesty, I like the way he comes out and he puts his bollocks on the table, for want of a better phrase. But he's saying stuff, having watched him walk back for one of the goals. Now, I know he might not get back in time to stop that, but you can't know at the time. Things can rebound off people, goalies can make saves, they can come back out. Don't be walking back. Do not be walking back and then coming out with big statements. So I think the players have got to take some responsibility. It's annoyed me at times, the scrutiny the manager's come under. But he is the figurehead. He's got to come under that, because that's what he's... Yeah, he is. He's responsible. And he'll have to take, the criticism on the chin, no doubt. And as I say, he'll pay for it with his job if it comes to that. But some of these players, Craig, they are getting away with murder. Some of them are getting away with murder where they're not turning up, or they're turning up for a period of the game or periods of the game. But when it gets a little bit tricky, when it gets a little bit difficult, some of them are just almost, I don't like the word downing tools, because it should never be a thing, and you don't want it to be a thing. But with your own eyes, you are seeing players just amble or not quite get themselves back into position, or almost token gesture it a little bit. You know, Salah the other day, I'm not saying he's responsible for the goal, because a lot happens between...
second one or the
yeah, a lot happens between him doing that and it ending up in the back of the net. But it is a token gesture to close someone down. Let's have it right.
2 minutes before he did exactly the same. It might have been his back, I don't know, but he didn't go down injured at that stage. He'd done exactly the same thing, and that's a worry, because that's someone from this season, that's a new player. It's all of this is really hard. I agree on the players. I think you want to see the doing and not just the saying. Do you know what I mean? It's one thing to say it in press conferences, Instagram posts. It's another thing to do it and enact it. It's just so hard in all of this, isn't it? Because I'm saying these things about a man that I really like. This isn't a football manager that I'm looking at and going, I cannot look at your face anymore in the way that Hodgson was. I cannot listen to one word you say because it's shite, because you don't have it. Slot has it, and so it's because we've seen it, because we've experienced it and felt it and had those moments with him, and then within a matter of months, given everything that's gone on, there's just so many factors to this that make it really, really difficult. But I just feel like there'll be a stage, if it's not already been, and it looked a bit like it the other night, but if it's not West Ham on Sunday and it's Sunday, I think there's just going to be a stage where everyone has to look at it and go, we have to put him out of his misery here, because we don't want the rot to continue. We don't want for it to get to a place where the players are just you can't repair them, because they look completely broken. The entire thing looks completely broken at the minute to me. So it's just it's such a hard place to be in, such a hard thing to talk about and to have answers to, because none of us have the answers.
And the good news is, Jack, West Ham have turned the corner. That's what you want. They've won 2 of the last 3 and drew the other one, and the one they drew was at Bournemouth, which is a tough place to go, and they were 2-0 up in that game as well. So maybe, you know, it's going to be one of them. I think on Sunday it's not going to be easy. You'd imagine they're going to be massively fired up for the game. Like other teams who faced Liverpool recently, they probably will smell a little bit of blood as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think if you were going to pick a match that you wanted to play after this, it wouldn't be West Ham with the form they've been in as well. It's interesting because I feel like on the back of these performances, historically, when we've had terrible results, we've usually been quite resilient. I'm not saying we've been back and got results and did that, but for me, what's more worrying is, rather than results and losing 3-0, is the performances and the way they've handled themselves. They'll know West Ham will be up for this match still, as you just said, they'll be smelling the blood. We need them now to have a bit of an ego about themselves, go, no, we are fucking better than this team here. And I think we could go there and West Ham could miss a handful of chances and be scraping a 0-0 draw. Is that good enough in the way they're performing, the way their attitude is on the pitch? I'm not sure. This will be really crucial to see how they bounce back from not just like last week, but the last couple of weeks, and seeing if they do have faith in the structure and the system. As you just said, I believe Slot does have it. I think it's just how he harnesses it. He's not a terrible manager. I think he's a very good manager tactical wise. How does he harness that in the way this is? This will be a really crucial turning point in how we go. Do we come back in a couple of years and go, remember this rut in 2005? Slot achieved this, or do we go, actually, remember we had Slot, he was awful? Like, where do we go from this position now? And I think this match is really crucial against the team who's going to be bang up for it.
You're going to have to turn a corner in the aways, aren't they? Like, the thing I was holding on to, and it's probably one of the reasons why you were so annoyed by Wednesday night in the way that I was it felt like the Champions League was still the one thing we had. Do you know what I mean? Where you're able to, you can get beat 1-0 against Galatasaray, but it wasn't an awful performance. It wasn't great, but there's still something to hold on to. Even in the 2021 season, you look back, we were still broadly all right away somehow, but getting beat at home in that run. While this time it just feels like we don't have either now, because we've just been beaten twice at home. So that's my worry. I think it's funny with Nuno and West Ham, because like on the face of it we think that they've turned a corner, and then I was reading something about the ownership not being too happy about them. Obviously they were 2-0 up and then they get pegged back 2-0. Callum Wilson's on a hat-trick, he gets taken off, he's not happy, the fans aren't happy at that. So it's not like we're not going into this place where they're flying. We shouldn't be looking at this and going, oh no, Nuno Santos, what's his name? Nuno Santos. Yeah. Nuno Santos, Nuno's West Ham are this brilliant flying West Ham now? They're not. So we still can't hurt them. It's just like whether we've got it in us, or whether we're down and out already, or whether there's a performance in us to be able to get an away win, or at very least an away performance.
Well, listen, the manager has done a press conference. He sneaked it in yesterday at 3 o'clock, but here he is talking about adapting and some of those messages to players that maybe aren't quite landing at the minute.
I think we always remember the last 1 or 2 games the most. I think our second half performance against City was much better than our first half performance. If I go further back, so the first loss we had was against Crystal Palace. Our second half performance was much better than the first half performance. So it has been, all the losses we've had have had a different story. And the last 2, indeed, the second half wasn't as good as the first half, but in the last 2 we conceded straight after half time. After already being disappointed in the first half, not getting what we thought we deserved. And like I said, in my opinion, the players kept on fighting after 2-1 because we were able to create 2 or 3 very good moments and chances. The Cody Gakpo header is, I think, usually a goal. But this moment of time, not for us. We've generated enough set pieces in that part of the game as well. But after the 3-1, again, that's the part people tend to remember, which is normal because the last part of the game. That was, of course, not of the standards and of the fighting spirit we would like to have in our team.
And Jack, we'll hear from the manager again shortly, talking about maybe some options at the weekend player-wise. We'll talk a little bit about individuals and selections a little bit later in the show, but one of the things he was asked, and I think people have been understandably talking about it to an extent, Neil's touched on this at the very start of the show though, about options and stuff, was fringe players and could he be doing a little bit more? Do you think from your point of view maybe there have just been times where he could have made slightly different choices? People will talk about, you know, Gomez, but we know there's a lot of injury history there. People will talk about Chiesa. People will even talk about, you know, throwing a kid into some of this, which I can't really get on board with, if I'm honest. I think throwing a 17-year-old into some of what we've seen recently doesn't feel like it would end particularly well. But are there things that he's maybe missing that you're sitting there thinking, well, if it was me, I'd maybe look at X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, definitely. I think when he's looking at the players, as you said, the fringe players, I think this needs to be done maybe 1-2 matches before this. The way Konaté's been playing on the week on Wednesday was no surprise with the way he's been before. Would he send a message if he did put Gravenberch in the back? Even Endo, even if players positions that aren't his natural position, that sends a message to the team. As you talked about Kwanzaa coming off at half time last time when he played awful. That's never going to happen at the moment with Konaté. So I think it does need to resource these fringe players, but as we talked about, it actually doesn't. When you look into it a bit more, it doesn't have that many options of what to do. And I think it's the authority of how he does that would be really interesting.
Anything for you that's missing in terms of like what he could do player-wise? Do you think there are? I mean, Neil's right. You know, you look at the bench. Liverpool spend so much money, and yet they find themselves with a bench, the unused subs the other night, where you're looking at them, you're thinking, not for me, not really. I can't really see anyone there where you think I'll throw him on. You know, he brings the lads on, he brings on, and they're the obvious ones. Obviously, Isak's on the bench the other night. You know, Chiesa comes on, shows a little bit of petulance, to be fair, but at least he's bringing a bit of energy and a bit of fight to proceedings. Is there anyone there you're thinking, I'd maybe throw a bit of a curveball in, I'd throw him into the mix, or do you think it's just got to be we go with what we've been going with?
It's as fans when things are really difficult, your first thought is, well, we just want a bit of fight. We just want you to, and actually what I want is guile, and I want nous, and I want like them to battle. I don't want them to like get needless yellow cards in the way that like Chiesa comes on, he just basically pushes him and just like, what the fuck's the point in that? It's needless. So I understand the idea about fight. I just want them to feel as if they're in a battle, but still have that nous, still have that sort of streetwise, yes, like you know, in terms of changes, I mean, I think Konaté I think he has to be brought out for his own sort of well-being at this stage, because you know it's not getting any better, and you know, you're just watching a footballer like rot. I've used this word loads, but you're just you watching this footballer rot. I've seen Real Madrid come out and say that they're not interested. Like, fucking hell, you know, I'm not surprised.
Mad that though, wasn't it? Like Real Madrid informing Liverpool we won't be pursuing Konaté. I mean, it feels a bit strange. I mean, You don't need to tell other clubs that you're not going to be buying their players or taking them on a free at the end of the season. Do you know what I mean?
Didn't you like pre-agreed it though? Is that where
I don't know.
I don't want to talk about Real Madrid because it'll send me in the river over there. But to add to all of this, but I think he needs to get taken on. It's really difficult with the injuries we've had because obviously right back means then that we're going to have a midfielder at right back. Maybe there's a Gravenberch move at centre back.
This is what I'm driving at before because Neil said something the other day where maybe. But it does give you a little bit of flashbacks to previous seasons where they've used midfielders in defence because that didn't work out too well. But Neil made the Gravenberch point. I think it was almost a case of I'm sick of seeing Canate, so I'll accept anything.
If we're getting beat by 3 goals in each game, then you might as well use someone that can play in that position and is a position that's going to have a lot of the ball because that's what teams have allowed. Can
he play there? That's a fair. I mean, I'm not convinced he definitely can play. I mean, I've seen him play there, but
Ian, I'm not sure, but there's no other options because like Joe Gomez is crocked or whatever's going on with Joe. Whether he can even play 60, they might just feel as if they could get 30 at the end of a game, but they're not even giving him that. So, Gravenberch feels like the only option. Obviously, that takes one out of midfield, which is an issue whenever you put Szoboszlai there. But that feels like something where we're trying something a bit different because it feels like one where I've watched Canate have the ball so much this season, and we're unable to progress the ball into anywhere interesting. We're unable to get out. At least with Gravenberch, he's an outlet in that way to be able to get us up the pitch a bit. So that might be an option, but then it's what you're doing in midfield. There's dominoes.
We'll come on to that in a little bit.
But there's dominoes all over. It's the thing with the right back. Bradley gets injured because you're playing him because Frimpong's got injured. So all of that.
You put Szoboszlai right back. So you haven't got him in midfield.
It's not easy. The one thing with the manager is it's that thing with managers where if you look at them throwing Hail Marys or whatever the expression is, where it's like, no, well, we're just going to last ditch. We're trying things that you're looking at and go, that feels like we're near the end, which is the worrying thing, really. It's the Rodgers 3 at the back. It's the, countless times you see managers revert away from what they're about and just try something out of desperation. But that is the one move because Canate just needs a bit of time out.
The manager was asked about using the squad a little bit more. Here he is talking about some of those fringe players.
I think you consider everything. Until now I've decided differently. But they train with us every single day and they can prove themselves in those moments. And it's always a balance between if you don't change, people think you should change more. And I think there was a period of this season where we lost and I made a few changes where people complained about the fact that I made a few changes too much, and there was never any time the same team. So of course I consider, but I cannot tell you what the end product of that consideration is for Sunday yet.
And Jack, shortly we'll hear from Neil and also Gio, the Hammers fan, to give us their perspective. In terms of the actual game, though, how do you want to see Liverpool start? Neil spoke before about first 15, give nothing away, boys. It almost feels like it has to be one of those games where, listen, if they get a goal early on, fabulous. If Liverpool score early, you'll take that all day long. But I do want to see a performance that just feels a little bit more mature, because I think you've almost seen you've seen petulance, you've seen a maturity in Liverpool's performances. You almost want to see a 15-20 where very, very little happens and then they can go from there.
Absolutely. Maturity is exactly what I was thinking as well. I think if we went into there and stopped leaking goals at the back, if we stopped giving anybody these stupid penalties, or I'd say the petulance of players sometimes, if we went in at half time at 0-0 and relatively nothing's happened, I'd be okay with it as long as we came out in the second half in the right way. If we come out again like we did against PSV, with a different mindset, with not doing everything that we were doing, I think that's when it becomes an issue. As you say, we need this mature performance. I'm not saying we should be chucking in loads of the kids and play it like an FA Cup game. It doesn't need to be like that. But it just needs to be a strong, mature performances from players that have been in these positions before. And it'd be really interesting to see how we do conduct ourselves in that first 15-20 minutes.
You spoke about leaders before. You almost do want to see some of those bigger players, whether they're doing it through, being vocal or not, or leading by example. But you do want to see, a Van Dijk, a Salah, players who've been there and done it. If it's Robertson starting as an example, listen, it may well be Kerkez, but players who have understood the brief, know what it's about to play for the football club, have won trophies. You want them to stand up and be counted, not to kind of make it, too much back to basics, but you do want to get that from the senior boys, where there feels like there's near a kind of a calmness to the performance, whereas it feels like too much of the time it's frantic. You know, a set piece happens, Liverpool start panicking. You just want to see that first 15, 20 just be really, really calm, not too much happens, and then Liverpool can, as we said before, they can build from there.
Yeah, at different times we've talked about wanting a fast start from Liverpool, mostly at home. I think this time round we just want to get through the first. It's just getting through, and even if we get to half time and it's 0-0, it just feels like the complete opposite of my way of thinking as a Liverpool fan. But if it can get to that stage and you've got through that period without anything happening, or without conceding a goal, or without an individual error, you know, or without a moment where head loss happens and the confidence drops or is gone completely, then it feels like it might be a positive, and then you're building it all up slowly. You know, confidence is maybe the key component in football, isn't it? And if it's shot, and we're not giving ourselves opportunities to build it, whether that's within games or whether that's in a run of games, but we just need to win one at the moment, and then you know, that feels like the way to do it. I think on the captain's point, I think that's been one of the most frustrating things for me, really, is we've celebrated this idea that we've got so many country captains, we've got so many players who feel like leaders, whether they're in the leadership group, whether they're the players that have won it all, gone through it all in Salah and Alisson and Van Dijk, or whether they're, you know, Szoboszlai, and he's the one that's been, you know, I think he's been great, or as good as he can be in the circumstances. That's been the most frustrating thing for me, really, is I'm looking around and going, well, actually, you're a captain of a country, or you've had the weight of a country on your shoulders at different times, and you know, so we need a bit of that now. This is times like this, times of crisis, you know, is the hardest time to be a leader, isn't it? And this is the time for them to sort of be stood up and counted for. I think over the next couple of games, you'll really see whether, you know, this idea that the manager has lost them or they've lost faith in it, because you're watching them against PSV the other night and going, well, actually, that looks a bit like that already. There's no hard places
now, Craig.
No,
I mean, everyone knows, like, the manager's under massive pressure. The players, now we go back 6-7 weeks ago, you can talk yourself into something where, yeah, it's a bad moment, this, but at some point they'll come out of it. You do get to find out now, because the players will know. They're all reading the same articles, they're all online and stuff. They'll know that there's a level of pressure now that wasn't there even 4 or 5 weeks ago. So I think you're right. You will get to see what some of these lads are about. If they are still back on the manager, you know, if Jonathan Lew's right and maybe they've stopped believing in the vision, I think you'll see that play out on Sunday.
Yeah.
Do you think like there's elements of like individuality in all this that doesn't help, in terms of, we talk about all the time about how good Konate's been or bad Konate, even Szoboszlai's been great. We talk about individuals on the pitch, but actually, could Liverpool have the pride in not leaking goals at the back? Could they have the pride on just keeping a clean sheet as a collective of people? I think a lot of the noise around the media has been around like how much we spent, how fit size, how good's Verts. Actually, as a collective, as a team, can we keep this and the pride in keeping the clean sheet and having these performances that we can grind out? I think there's a lot of individuals, but at the moment aren't playing as one big team playing for Liverpool, where there's a lot of, as you say, individual captains and personalities and egos. Can we put these all together and harness them in the right way? Because I actually don't think there's one overall leader that can take that position in each role, if that makes sense. I think it's better more as a collective.
Yeah, they've not looked particularly great as a unit, have they?
No.
And you can look at things like, you know, are they pressing properly and stuff like that. I think that's been.
Have they been asked to press?
Well, I mean, it's been clear in matches, certainly against PSV. It looked an absolute mess, certainly second half. Listen, it is West Ham at the weekend. Here is Gio from Hammers Chat.
Joined by Gio from Hammers Chat to talk about, well, West Ham United and where they're up to. There are 6 teams in the country that are unbeaten in the last 3 games. Only 6 teams are unbeaten in the last 3 games. 16th place Nottingham Forest are one of them, and 17th place West Ham United are one of them as well. That suggests there's been something of a turnaround, Gio. What is it? What's been different? What's Nuno done differently across the last 3 games that's made such a difference?
Played the team fans have been wanting to see. It is that simple. Prior to those 3 games, we played Brentford and Leeds, and the international break before the one we just had was a bad thing for Nuno. So he came in, he had 2 days, we played Everton away, we got the draw. The following weekend, we played Arsenal, we got beat, but it was an okay performance. Then we had an international break. But the problem was, half the team were away on international duty, so he was left with half the squad, and he decided to use that squad and really try and work with what he had on the training pitch for 2 weeks and come up with a solution for the games after international break, which were at home to Brentford and away to Leeds United, which were two what we've seen as must-win games for West Ham. But he ended up playing Ollie Scars, our young left back, who Salah gave a hard time to last season. He played him right back.
Yep.
Then in midfield, he played Souček and Irving, who no one ever wanted to see that combination. So he played against Brentford. We were awful, got beat comfortably. Then he did the same thing again against Leeds because he decided, actually, my idea wasn't the wrong idea, just the players didn't implement it correctly. And had they done what I was wanting them to do, it would have yielded a result. So we got beat by Leeds. But in that game, there was Ollie Scars got injured. Wilson came on quite early. And after the match, Nuno admitted that we looked a bit better with a striker on the pitch. Yeah. And then when we played Newcastle, he went with a midfield three that fans have been wanting to see all season, which is Potts, Fernandes and Paqueta. Wilson was up front. We got a good win against Newcastle. Followed it up with a strong win against Burnley. And then went to Bournemouth last weekend, 2-0 up at half-time, happy days, and we threw it away in the second half. And we seen Nottingham Forest Nuno in the second half, which was, we're going to see this out. We're just going to defend and shut up shop. And I think he's realised pretty quickly the defenders are not as good as what he had at the City ground last season. So it's going to be interesting to see how he approaches this game, should at any point West Ham take the lead. Because I think he got a little bit of a hard lesson last week. So there's been an upturn in form, Neil, and I think, but a lot of it I think is just putting square pegs in square holes, really.
It seems like he's got a couple of selection decisions to make coming into this one. You mentioned Somerville played very well before, but he wasn't available last week. You mentioned Paqueta doing very, very well as well when a couple of games ago, but he wasn't available last week either. And he went with a back five against Bournemouth. Brings Igor in, who so far hasn't had that much game time, full stop, under either of the managers. It seems to me like this is almost the key question, really, which is what will they do on the left-hand side and what will the shape be? We know he likes a back three from time to time, but as you say, in the end, in that second half period, West Ham were very much backs against the wall against Bournemouth. So what are your instincts in terms of what he will do? I feel as though we can quite comfortably almost name 9 of the 11, but the other 2 places will dictate shape, and arguably they'll dictate how front-footed West Ham intend to be.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. You can name 9 of the 11. I think it will come down to whether Somerville's fit or not. I think it's been described as a minor knock, but he's not been the best in terms of his injury record since we signed him last summer. He's missed quite a lot of football, actually. So I think there's a little bit of hesitation that he's perhaps going to be out for more than one game. If so, we don't really know what he's going to do, because we've seen Guilherme start there against Bournemouth, a young player that we signed last summer, and he's never really had a chance. And he struggled. He struggled against Bournemouth. He went off at half-time. Some suggesting it was performance-based, some suggested it was not. But either way, getting subbed off at half-time when you're a young player, it's not ideal, and it would suggest the manager's unhappy with your performances. And his solution was to play Kyle Walker-Peters left wing. And because we don't have any other wingers, we've got 3 wingers, and that's it. That's the selection. So Somerville's out. It's going to be very interesting to see what he does. And I think it might force his hand a little bit to go to a back 3 and play wing back, so then he doesn't have to come up with a solution playing wide left midfield. What he could maybe do is what we did against Nottingham Forest, is and that was when Nuno was in charge at Nottingham Forest when we beat them, put Fernandes on the left, and he might do that. He has played there a little bit more for Southampton than West Ham. I think Paqueta was suspended for 1 game, so he'll come straight back into the team. Nuno's made it very clear that he's sort of his most important player, and Nuno's done a lot of ego massaging of Paqueta over the last few weeks. You know, before the Newcastle game, he kept speaking about how Paqueta's a number 10, and number 10's a symbol, and it's an important thing. And we got a brilliant performance out of Paqueta against Newcastle. Not so good against Burnley, but we missed him against Bournemouth. I think he'll be straight back in the team. I think Nuno will be doing that whole ego massaging again. But I quite like it. He's put it on Paqueta to turn up a little bit, and he has done so far under him. So I think, it might come down to the fitness of Somerville, because I think the rest of it is picking itself at the minute.
What are your expectations then for the game? Everyone knows Liverpool are in a really bad run of form, poor performances. It seems as though Also, Liverpool are away from home, although Liverpool have shipped 7 goals in the last 2 home games, so that may not make that much of a difference. What are your expectations and the general sort of West Ham supporter base's expectations for this one?
I think the general fan base is that Liverpool will win. It's a little bit, it's typical West Ham that, you need a win, you come play us and we'll give it to you kind of thing. But my expectations are we should be winning this game. We've got to try our best to remove the name Liverpool Football Club and look at it emotionless and as cold as we can, which is we're coming up against a side who lost 9 of the last 12. They're not in great nick at the minute. There's a lot of pressure. Curtis Jones's interview after the game during the week was interesting and eye-opening, and it looked like it was someone that was almost like hurt at the performances and results of Liverpool, and that gives you a bit of an insight into the dressing room, and it would suggest that maybe, I don't know, the harmony's not quite there in that Liverpool team at the minute. This is a vulnerable Liverpool team that we're away to play, and I think we have to take advantage of it. We've come up against Liverpool many times in the past where you're in great form, and it's something going into the game you think, well, it doesn't really matter what we do, we're going to get beat because Liverpool are too good. It's a different animal we're away to play. But on Sunday, I'm not even sure it's a wounded animal. It's almost like an animal that's ready to be put down. And the general gist of the fan base is there's going to be a backlash. But I'm sitting here thinking, well, surely the backlash would have come 3 games ago, 4 games ago, 5 games ago. You can't keep going on to match game 13 and go, oh, here comes the backlash. At some point, we've just got to say this is just a bad Liverpool team at the minute. And I'm sure you'll turn it around at some point. But why does it have to be this weekend? I think we've got to be looking at this game as one that we can win and hope that when you go to play Burnley, Wolves, Leeds United, you're back in form and you beat them. And actually, when coming in the season, we picked up more points against Liverpool than those in and around us. And those bonus points, as I would call it, are why we've stayed up hopefully comfortably and compared to those 3 that have gone down. This is a winnable fixture. Will we win it? I'm not so sure, because I've seen what Nuno did in the second half against Bournemouth last week, and I didn't like it. We were up against quite a poor Bournemouth team, and we made it easy for Bournemouth to dominate us in the second half because we just ran all the way back to our box and said, here's the ball, what are you going to do? Now, I guess the positive there is when you've come up against teams that come on to you like Real Madrid, you've actually beat them in the last 12 games, and it's those that sit back that you've struggled against. So Nuno's tactics may work, but again, I go back to the centre-back thing. That's a lot of pressure on the likes of Kilman, who's not played well since we signed him for 40 million. It's a lot of pressure on him. And you've still got quality players, and you've got players that I call X Factor. They've all got it. Salah, TK, Isak. I know he's not played well. He's still, in my opinion, a top striker. He just needs a moment. He scores one. I think he'll continue scoring going forward. He just needs to get that first one. Being a West Ham fan long enough, it does feel like, Sunday will be the game that you will get beat 2-0. Wirtz and Isak will score the goals and that's it. But I don't know. I'm trying to look at it, Neil, that this is a bad Liverpool team right now, and we've got to have 7 points from 3 games. Has got to bring confidence. It's got to bring a little bit of belief that you can get results and you can pick up results. So I want to see all that on Sunday. I want to see maybe not swagger, but confident that we can go out there, execute the game plan, and walk away, hopefully with 3 points, but at the very least with a point.
Excellent stuff from Gio. Let's get back over.
Neil, Gio there giving us the opposition perspective. How do you see the game kind of shaping up? What do you think they'll do? I mean, no doubt they'll have looked at Liverpool over recent weeks and felt they can get at us. How do you see them lining up?
There's 9 I think we can be, quite convinced of, sort of to go through the outfield players. Then Juve starts left back, Wan-Bissaka right back, could be wing back, we'll come back onto that. At the minute, that's the way the yellow ones are set up in here. I think that's Debo and Kilman will start. Igor's been getting an occasional appearance as part of them going to a back 3, which they did last weekend against Bournemouth. It's worth saying they get a 2-2 against Bournemouth, but Bournemouth battered them second half. The expected goals for Bournemouth was in excess of 3.5.
Keeper was brilliant, wasn't he?
Yeah, keeper was really, really good, but Bournemouth are all over them in that second half period. So it might mean that the manager doesn't want to do the same thing. He'll start Freddie Potts, he'll start Mateus Fernandes, he'll start Callum Wilson, he'll start Jared Bowen. They're the ones you know for a fact he'll almost certainly start Paqueta. Paqueta was just suspended last week, but the question is where. If he wants to keep the back five, he's got two there. He could play Paqueta off the left, knowing that Paqueta will become a sort of number 10 type for him, so we'll sort of pull in there, because that's what he is as a footballer. We love him. Whenever you see him, you're always so impressed by him. He's got a great record against Liverpool in terms of his performance. So I think that he will start. It just becomes a matter of where. And then the other question then becomes, well, do they want to go for it and go 4-2-3-1? We often say Liverpool struggle against a back three, but Liverpool struggle against everything now. So you might as well not get too carried away. And also it's worth saying, when we were going to Brentford, we all went, well, they'll go back three because that's what they do. And they didn't. They looked at Liverpool and they went, no, we're going to play a back four and this is how we're going to get at you. So if Somerville's fit, Somerville may well start left-hand side and then it'll look a little bit more like this. In terms of the sort of the wider setup. The other option he could do is whack another defensive style midfielder in and have Fernandes play left-hand side in a 4-2-3-1 and have him come a little bit narrow as well, and then that gives Paqueta more room in the middle of the pitch to feel as though he can go and do his business. So ultimately you'll know whether or not if Igor started to back three, that's the way in which it'll be from a West Ham point of view. Expect Paqueta to start, whether he's off the left or in the middle, we'll see. If Igor doesn't start and he goes with someone else in the middle of the park next to Potts, could be Souček, could be the new sign in the summer whose name just suddenly escapes me, unfortunately, or could involve a little bit of a tweak around there, then it could be 4-2-3-1 with Paqueta looking to really get at Liverpool in amongst these sorts of ways. But from Liverpool's point of view, I think that the key thing that they need to do is they need to be prepared for all eventualities. There can't be any sort of, we were surprised by what they did. They've played different formations across the last 2 weeks. They've had different players involved across the last couple of weeks. We know that Nuno likes a Liverpool-specific plan. So whilst they might not do exactly what we expect, we should expect not to be able to expect anything. So you've got to be prepped for everything, lads. You've got to have your way of playing that you're going to impose yourself, because, they're going to ask you a couple of questions, but I've just sort of summed them up there, if you see what I mean. It's that straightforward from Liverpool's point of view. So they haven't just got one way of playing. There's not just one approach. But you know who the key players are. You know to keep Bowen quiet. You know the area, the channel he wants to run in is this one. You know that Wilson wants to occupy your centre backs. You know that Paqueta wants to be in here. I'm never quite sure which way to pronounce it. You know what this is. You know Juve wants to be pushing up on the left hand side. You know what Wan-Bissaka is. You know what this is, one way or another. And so Liverpool should be well and truly prepared for it. And I think we'll get a bit of an insight into what West Ham expect by virtue of how many centre backs they pick.
So what to expect from Liverpool then, in terms of a lineup? The manager said in his press conference, he was asked about Alisson, he should be fine, no problem there. What do you think he'll do in that kind of back four area? Because there's not maybe a question certainly over the captain, but the rest of it's probably up for grabs.
I think he still does Canate. I said I'd like a change. I don't think he changes that.
I agree. I think he'll
do Canate again, and I think there's maybe a shout to look at Robertson instead of Kurgazlo. I thought Kurgaz did all right. He seemed to have more license going forward the other night in the way that you might have more expected watching him at Bournemouth. But I think he maybe just goes Kurgaz again, and then he did. I think he probably just. I think it's the same actually. I'm just thinking about it. I think he might just do the same.
So Curtis Jones at right back.
I think so. Yeah. I think particularly in a game like this away from home, I think what you've seen what you lose in Dominic Szoboszlai. Obviously, look, we saw us get beat 4-1 the other night. Dom Szoboszlai was in the midfield, but I think that's what he might do. I think he'd rather Dom Szoboszlai in centre mid, and I think he'll trust Jones enough at right back to do him again. But again, he doesn't have loads of options here.
Midfield then, Jack, do you think it will be the exact same as it was the other night? I think, Szoboszlai is the one who, throughout all of this, has pretty much come out with the most credit. I think he's been at it most weeks, to be fair. I think there are goals through the night where you're looking at the midfield. And that's what I talked about before, about the balance of it. Even towards the end of last season, that was, listen, you're going to win the league, so you can't argue too much. But I'm always someone who's looking to evolve, if you can, with certain positions. And I feel like there's a lot of times this season where the three midfielders are getting ahead of the ball. That can't be the same on Sunday. Someone has to sit and, understand when to go, when not to go. Even if someone's just pulling someone else into him a little bit more. I'm not seeing a lot of that shouting on the pitch where all of a sudden it feels like there's a lot of communication in the middle of the park. Do you think it will be as they were the other night against PSV?
I think largely, yeah, but I think the changes need to come sooner. I think, I was just thinking about this then. Do you put the Szoboszlai at right back, and then do you put, I don't know, it's difficult to know, isn't it, what to do with the leadership element. Because
I think Szoboszlai has to play midfield. I think
you're right with thinking about it now, but he's also needs to command that as well, which he's done quite well in fairness. I'll be honest, I don't have the answers. It's very difficult to know which partnerships to go to. Is Ekitike, is he fit? I'm not sure. Do you go with Gakpo? Yeah, it's interesting to know what to do.
It feels like a lot of the same.
That's what I mean. I think every time you go with different systems, it's going to be more or less the same, just with different variable outcomes with the players. I think it's an awful one.
You know, you were talking about the midfield there. Like last season, it felt like maybe because we were playing Gravenberch in that position, that deeper position for the first time, it felt like the other two were, well, tactically and through instruction, staying close to him, to maybe look after him, because it's sort of early days in his. But like, you know, when you're watching, the midfield just looks so open now. It looks as if they're so far away, and whether that again is through instruction at different times, McAllister pushing into a 10 position or whatever, it just feels as if they've been so disjointed, and just like there's just this big open
Craig,
space.
I can't believe the gaps. I sit up fairly high in the cop.
That's one of the biggest. That's one of the biggest changes from last season.
I honestly can't believe that the amount of times this season, even when they were winning games, I'm looking at the middle of the park and I'm just seeing masses of space. That surely can't be instruction. Obviously, we know Neil said about Gravenberch, he's got maybe a bit more license to go forward. I'm not sure I want him doing that, because Liverpool are getting exposed so many times. But I almost felt, and I like Gravenberch as a player, so this is not to say I don't rate him. I rate him really, really highly, but I don't think it always comes naturally, that sitting position. I think he does want to get about a little bit, and I think towards the second half of last season, Liverpool had such a kind of distance at the top of the league. We never really felt under threat, but I think you could tell with Gravenberch, his performances were starting to tail off a little bit, but then he starts like a house on fire this season. He's brilliant, and then he's just kind of almost got himself into a bit of poor form, but he's not being helped by his mates. Yeah. Certainly McAllister, who's massively off form. So when I'm talking about another midfielder at the start of the season, and I said that on shows over the summer, I was saying it knowing full well that they'd won the league, that midfield. So it wasn't like they're awful players. They're all very, very, very good footballers in their own right. It was almost, is the balance quite there? You know, I'm watching Elliot Anderson play for Forest, and I think he's been so impressive, but he looks to me as a footballer that certainly understands the brief of what it is just to kind of sit in front of a back four. Not to say he'll play well all the time, but you can certainly see him understanding when the danger's coming. You saw it at Anfield the other day, you know, when Forest are going forward, even for that, I think it's the second goal right after half-time. He is the one who's not going anywhere. He's like, I'm sitting here right in front of my
That's sort of my point with Gravenberch. So I look at that three, and last season I looked at that three, particularly the first 6 months, and was like, the balance is perfect there. You've got sort of everything you'd want from a midfield three for a side that's chasing top or a title. But Gravenberch was sitting, and his mate was usually, it felt as if it was more of a two, and I might be wrong here.
Well, the manager can't do that. He can't say so, and this is what I'm coming back to, and I've said to Neil before, it doesn't always have to be solved in the transfer market. You could say to two of them, you just sit together. While it's like this, while it's so uncomfortable and we're getting beat every week, you don't all need to be going. I'm even seeing them in recent games, even against Villa. Now, they win that game, but there was times in that match, and they're on a poor run then, where all three of them are ahead of the ball on numerous occasions, and they get away with it a couple of times. There's things pinging off the post and stuff like that. They've got to be conscious of that. The balance has to be right, but they can't all be going. There's got to be more talking, and maybe it's a centre-halves, you know. Again, I think it's been referenced on these shows. Neil certainly said it, but I've heard it when he's been on the overlap. And Sol Campbell would always be telling the midfielders in front of him, don't be fucking going anywhere. Yeah. Don't be going. Patrick Vieira, you stay there. You sit there. Don't fucking leave me here. Maybe that is going on, and you can't always hear it in the stands. But given what you're seeing, there's no sense of it really happening, because there's too many times, too many games where the gaps are so big.
I think that's what I was kind of getting at before, is in terms of like, you can interchange the midfield in terms of no one's really outstanding apart from Szoboszlai. He's had a decent season, but if you turn in terms of leadership and stuff, we have a lot of individual leaders for the countries, but who's the actual voice at the back? Who's that mouthpiece to do that? That Van Dijk has been good at that over the years, but it doesn't seem any unity. You could interchange all these players into different positions, and we can talk about tactics and formations and all that, but if they've not got that clarity, if there is space massively in the midfield, that could be anyone at the moment in them positions. I think that's the massive thing we're losing, is that unity and voices within the team, and that pride in becoming together as a big unit, and having the pride in like the clean sheets, having pride in getting clean shots on target, and just getting stuck in, roll your sleeves up sort of mentality. I just don't think we've had it recently.
Neil, top end of the pitch, as we start to wrap up, do you think it will just be a case of Isak, Gakpo, Salah, if we can assume that Ekitiki's maybe not quite ready to start?
I think Ekitike may be ready to start, but the problem is he's not ready to finish. And this is where I've got to push him. I don't want the manager to start. If you said to me you got the perfect versions of the footballers in attack, I wouldn't be starting Gakpo. But again, we have to allow for the manager the reason why he might be starting.
Would you do
Gakpo.
Ekitike on the left?
Yeah, that's what I'd do. But none of us genuinely sit here and think that Ekitike or Isak have got 90 minutes in them. None of us do. We just don't. And anyone listening to this who thinks they've got 90 minutes in them is kidding themselves. So at which point then you need to plan to take two of them off? What's your plan to take two of them off? All right, you've got Gakpo on the bench now from what I've just said. So Gakpo's one of your subs. What's your other sub? You're talking about Chiesa, who, ultimately the other night I thought you got to see what he is now as a footballer in quite brutal circumstances. PSV aren't that good a side. To me, Chiesa looked like, get him in the penalty area, he can create a little bit of space for himself and get a really good shot off. Everything else, he was just so far away from what was required. So he's all right around the penalty area, but you're not going to get anything else out of him. So you're in the situation where the manager genuinely has not got... I'd like to start Ekitike there, Isak there, have Isak come over to there to use the board. And so Isak through the middle, but pulling left. The two of them playing quite close together, really annoying West Ham's defenders. Where are they popping up? But if you do that, you need to accept that Isak's not doing beyond 60, realistically, for you. Maybe getting to 65. And Ekitike's not getting beyond 70 for you. So you're basically saying, I'm playing these are my two best number 9s, but we're going to say that neither of them's on the pitch for the last 25 minutes.
And that might have been a problem in the games, the first 10 games where it was on a knife edge. I wonder whether now strategically you might look at it and go, actually, I just need to get the best players on the pitch for the first 60, 70 to allow us to ensure we're still in the game on 70. And then, hopefully you're winning and you can bring Gakpo on to be annoying and,
And change it to 2 10s. And I think the idea that Viet might train is no bad thing if that gives him another body who we can do something with an attack. And I would consider probably just erring on the side of that. But I want to again say, but this is the reason why you won't. Because what he doesn't want is to be coming into the line. And we used to discuss this all the time with the previous manager. And the previous manager wanted to make sure he could finish games strongly as well. And it's what coaches want. A manager doesn't want to think, it might be really hard for us to score a goal with 20 minutes to go. Because away from home in the Premier League, for almost every team in the country, you could generally do with feeling like you can score a goal with 20 minutes to go. So I think it's a massive decision for them, and this throws back to the idea that they're just understocked. They're just understocked up there in players that the manager can trust, which is a hell of a thing to say when you look at the money that's spent, but it just is. I would probably... What doesn't help as well is there's a midweek game on Wednesday, but I'd go for it. It's not my job, but I'd go for it and have the idea that almost at all costs, 60 Gakpo's coming on for Isak, off the base of the fact that you're then also going to start Isak on Wednesday as well, and go from there. That's probably what I'd just about do. And also the other part of this is Gakpo's goal record away from home is so poor. So I'd be looking at maybe just sort of having in the back of our minds, all right, this is how we're going to get something, and it's something new. That's the other thing. It's something that they can all look at and go, well, that's different. When they're lining up, they can go, well, that's different. That could give us something more. And I thought Ekitike first half against PSV, I thought his general attitude, demeanour, the way in which he went about his business was really, really impressive. So I think
really bright, wasn't he?
So I think if you can get another decent 70 minutes of that on the pitch, if it coincides with Isak, and I think there's one other thing, which is the two of them know they're each other's future. Ekitike and Isak needed to work. They needed to start working from now. So I think that could work for you as well. So I'd probably just err on the side of doing it. But if he doesn't, I'm not going to sit here and go, I think it's insane. Oh, how could he? Because he's thinking about, I've got to worry about 100 minutes of football. I've not just got to worry about what Akko thinks when the team sheet drops.
Right.
I've put a little fat smile on Craig Hannan's face. He's not going to worry. He's got to worry about 100 minutes of football.
He's going to worry about the predictions in a minute when I ask him. What are you saying? Give me a prediction, honest prediction. How do you think it'll go?
Honest prediction.
Yeah, I know.
I think we're going to win.
Do you?
Yeah, I think we're going to win. I think something at some point is going to bounce for us. I think there's the sheer weight of numbers. Listen, it can go on. You've seen it go on in the past. The weight of numbers when Klopp wasn't winning home games was at some point it'll break and it'll just turn. It'll be a little bit different. I do think this goes back to, like, for instance, I wasn't that confident going into Palace. I wasn't that confident going into Chelsea. I was arguing on these shows I'll take a point, especially at Chelsea. So I'm not always sort of, unspeakably... I think I said I thought we'd beat Chelsea, but you saw how the game played out, and we nearly did in a couple of ways. Yeah, I think if we score first, we'll win. And I think we'll score first, so I think we'll win. If you see what I mean. There's a new low for this team. Let's just be crystal clear, which is if it scores first and loses. So don't think we haven't hit rock bottom.
Hasn't happened, has it?
No, we haven't hit rock bottom yet, lads. Something to look forward to.
Oh God! Right. Yeah.
But I think if they score first, and I think that's just where they are. And by the way, when that happens, then the same prediction's the case for Sunderland. If they score first and win and beat West Ham, then my prediction for Sunderland is I think if they score first, they'll win. And then if they do that again, then my prediction for Leeds is I think if they score first, they'll win. This is where we are. This is just where the club is, where the team finds itself at this point in time. Resilience is easily lost and it takes ages to build it back up. But yeah, I actually am a bit more optimistic than others. I think they'll get a result on Sunday.
Jack?
Yeah, I think the first half.
Big sigh.
Yeah, I don't know what I meant to follow that with.
By all means, say if you think they're going to get beat, just say you think they're going to get beat.
No, I don't think we'll get beat. I think we could probably scrape a draw. I'm hoping it could be like a 1-0 Liverpool. I think the first half we go 0-0, we could probably get a goal towards the second half. I'm optimistically going to say 1-0.
Go on.
I've never predicted Liverpool getting beat, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go 1-1. Without knowing if I really mean it or not.
Do we score first?
I'm not that convinced,
on each of these, like I was bullish at the City game. Obviously, last week when we did the pre-match warm-up, I still thought Liverpool would win. I think when you're seeing things that they were, so the Forest game was at a time when I still felt like we had home and we were able to do the business at home. I think obviously the away form is really, really worrying. But I mean, if Liverpool can get an early goal or a first goal, then who knows what can happen.
I can't imagine. Maybe it is 1-1. It's one of the likeliest scorelines in football. I just don't know how it finishes 1-1.
No, I know.
I literally can't. I can't picture unless they literally equalise with the last kick.
Yeah.
And then manage not to score from the kick-off like Nottingham Forest did.
Yeah, but it's hard to picture Liverpool win at the minute, and it's hard to picture Liverpool getting a clean sheet at the minute. And
you don't want to predict a defeat, so you.
And I think if they score first, I think like you've still seen, there is going to be moments where they're going to have to put up with an onslaught, or they're going to have to put up with pressure at the very least away from
and they don't like that, do they?
And they don't show resilience, so that's where I've ended up at 1-1.
Yeah, no, I can see it. That has been the pre-match warm-up, slightly longer.
Did I just have a breakdown in that show?
I don't know, slightly longer than normal. We've not even finished it yet. Slightly longer than normal, but there's been a lot to talk about. Thank you to all the guests, Paddy behind the cameras. We will see you very soon.